A grim situation. Xi Jinping and the Kuomintang's newly elected chairperson agree they are opposed to Taiwan independence. The British sail through the Taiwan Strait. The HMS Richmond tweets it's traversing the contentious waters. A friend in need. 160,000 vaccines arrive from Slovakia, up from 10,000 pledged as Taiwan races to vaccinate its population. And better late than never. 36 couples tie the knot in Hualien after a 6-month pandemic delay. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. An exchange of messages between China's president and the new leader of Taiwan's main opposition party is drawing fire in Taiwan. Premier Su Zhenchang says the exchange proves the KMT will not defend the nation's sovereignty.
The new leader of the Kuomintang, Eric Chu, says he hopes to cooperate with China's ruling Communist Party based on the so-called 1992 consensus on One China. Chu was responding to a congratulations message sent by the Chinese President Xi Jinping. The 60-year-old former presidential candidate won Saturday's leadership election with over 85,000 votes. That's 46% of party members who voted. The turnout was just over 50%. Xi's message stated the importance of the 1992 consensus and China's opposition to Taiwan independence. He said he hoped the two parties would work towards national unification. Chu's response affirmed Xi's first 2 points. He also said his party's past engagement with China had improved cross-strait ties.
我的回电当中也是9·2共识，反对台独。我们不会担心这些绿营逢中必反，又在那边抹红。
Taiwan's current government does not acknowledge the 1992 consensus. As a result, Beijing has refused to engage with the Tsai Ing-wen administration. The consensus refers to a tacit understanding reached in 1992 between the then Kuomintang government of Taiwan and the Chinese Communist Party. Under the consensus, both sides of the Taiwan Strait acknowledge that there is only one China. The KMT's version of the consensus adds that each side is free to define what one China means. Beijing, however, has never publicly acknowledged the second part of that interpretation. Meanwhile, other opposition parties have also been putting pressure on the Kuomintang.
深信人民还是期盼国民党不只是嘴巴上面要当战斗蓝，而是要拿出实质的作为。
The Kuomintang has long positioned itself as a party that can handle cross-strait relations effectively. But this stance is now a double-edged sword, as most younger people in Taiwan have embraced a purely Taiwanese identity. Recent election cycles have shown that pledging closer ties with China has not been a winning platform at the ballot box. Klein Wang and William Yen for TaiwanPlus.
To understand more about what the exchange of messages might mean for Eric Chu, known locally as Zhu Lilun, and the KMT under his leadership, we spoke to Lev Nachman of the Harvard Fairbanks Center.
So this is the first correspondence that the KMT and CCP have openly had, especially since the last KMT party chair. Under Johnny Chiang, he never got any sort of acknowledgement from the CCP, and I think the fact that Zhu Lilun was able to get a letter from Xi Jinping, I think shows that he's able to market this ability to communicate with the CCP in a way that not only could his predecessor not, but that the DPP cannot. The challenge for Zhu Lilun, though, is how to use this in a way that is viably marketable in Taiwan, because this kind of correspondence is going to fall on deaf ears for a lot of people. And if anything, it'll hurt his odds. But at the same time, there is an important voter base that Zhu Lilun has to appeal to. And I think being able to show this kind of correspondence with the CCP is what's going to help him make sure that deep blue KMTers are still able and going to support and vote for the KMT in upcoming elections.
Zhu Lilun is an experienced senior KMT politician, and many will regard him as a steady hand on the tiller. But he also failed rather dramatically in his past presidential bid in 2016. So what do you think are the election prospects of the KMT under his leadership in the next round of elections?
So 2016 election was a total disaster. Not entirely Julie Lin's fault, largely because they first nominated Hong Xiuzhu, who was such a bad candidate that they had to replace her with Julie Lin in the last minute. But, I think Zhu was in an interesting position because he has this correspondence with the CCP. He's able to market himself as kind of the one who's able to play to both sides. That's not going to be particularly popular necessarily for a presidential run. I'm not convinced that Eric Chu himself is going to run for president in 2024. If the KMT were smart, they'd be looking at the opinion polls and seeing just how popular Hou Youyi is. And considering that Hou Youyi has such high popularity ratings with light green DPP voters, I think, we could see a situation in which Zhu Lilin is able to kind of say the things that appeal to the PRC in a way that might overly isolate Hou Youyi if he were the one to say this as a presidential nominee. Essentially creating a team where you have Zhu Lilin able to appeal to deep blue voters, while Hou Youyi is still able, as a presidential nominee, able to appeal to moderate light blue, light green voters.
A British Royal Navy frigate passed through the Taiwan Strait en route to visit Vietnam. The HMS Richmond announced its movement on its official Twitter account. The UK Ministry of Defence says the frigate recently conducted operations in the East China Sea to support United Nations sanctions targeting North Korea's ballistic missile program. The UK says it has also recently dispatched the HMS Spey and HMS Tamar to the Indo-Pacific to deliver a permanent force presence. British Member of Parliament Ian Duncan-Smith has called for greater vigilance of China's actions. A former leader of the Conservative Party, Duncan-Smith is one of 7 British politicians sanctioned by China in March for criticising the country's human rights abuses in Xinjiang. In response, Duncan-Smith earlier this month led a move to bar the Chinese ambassador to the UK from speaking in the British Parliament. He also said Britain's allies need to reassess their reliance on China and specifically raised the question of Taiwan.
We need to discuss what is going on with Taiwan and what may happen. We have to deal with the reality. And I think British governments and American governments are coming to the very clear sense that Xi Jinping isn't really in the game of modifying his demands, modifying his ambitions for China. And as a result of that, that will bring them into direct clash with friends and allies in the region as China throws its weight around. So, we're seeing a toughening of that stance. And as you said earlier on, there's lots of people that think we should just continue to trade with China in the way that we do. My view is not really, because what we do is we build up China's capacity to make these threats and to follow through. So we need to think again about the nature of our dependency.
China on Friday introduced a blanket ban on all cryptocurrency transactions and mining, hitting Bitcoin and other major virtual currencies. To understand what this move could mean, we spoke to Wayne Huang, CEO of Taiwanese blockchain firm XREX. We started by asking how the industry has reacted to the news of China's ban.
I think China's always taken a scrutinizing stance against cryptocurrencies. And the central bank has announced this type of ban multiple times in the past. It doesn't come as a surprise to the majority of the industry, especially recently. They've been pushing for banning of crypto mining as well. We're already seeing a huge exodus of businesses. And these are very profitable, very sizable businesses leaving China, and a huge exodus of top talents as well. Many of the top management of some of the best cryptocurrency companies in China has already relocated themselves to other countries such as Singapore.
So do you think Taiwan stands to benefit from this ban and the exodus of talents and capital out of cryptocurrency in China?
I definitely think so. Over the past 6 months, we've already seen Canada, Singapore, especially Singapore, and the US to a certain extent benefit from this very rigid stance by the Chinese central bank and by the Chinese regulators. the large exodus of capital, successful businesses, and top cryptocurrency and blockchain talents has really benefited these countries. And I would really urge Taiwan to leverage this opportunity to attract good businesses, talents, and capital into Taiwan, especially now that since July 1st, virtual asset service is a regulated industry in Taiwan.
With 0 COVID cases reported in Taiwan today, the government is easing COVID prevention measures starting this week. The public will still have to wait another 2 weeks for the opening of some entertainment venues, and certain restrictions will remain. Sandy Chi has more.
Lights on the landmark Taipei 101 building thanks Slovakia for the 160,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccine that arrived in Taiwan over the weekend. With more vaccines coming in, more people will be able to get their second dose of AstraZeneca, or for other people, their first.
对象权是7月22日前已接种第一剂52岁以上的民众。
To date, 52% of people in Taiwan have received one shot of COVID vaccine, but only around 9% are fully vaccinated. Along with the pandemic, flu season is also around the corner. The government's seasonal flu vaccine program will get underway from October 1st. Priority will be given to people at higher risk of infection or with serious health complications. The health minister said people should wait at least 7 days between receiving a flu shot and a COVID-19 jab. The gap helps doctors to determine the cause if either vaccine produces side effects. Sandy Chi and Chris Ma for TaiwanPlus.
It has been a long time since the last mass wedding in Hualien. 36 couples were married in a mass ceremony on September 26th. Hualien usually holds mass wedding ceremonies every 3 months, but this one was postponed several times due to the epidemic.
Donning face masks in line with epidemic prevention measures, 36 couples tied the knot in a mass wedding in Hualien on Sunday. The event was originally scheduled for March, but was postponed twice due to coronavirus restrictions. For the happy couples, some dressed in traditional indigenous attire, finally walked down the aisle in a socially distanced outdoor ceremony.
虽然说已经先去登记了，可是还是很期待说这一场第一次的婚礼可以顺利的举行。
因为我们的婚礼也没有办法办成，所以透过这个，我们就可以有一个至少公正的仪式，觉得很棒。
Hualien County Magistrate Xu Chenwei presided over the ceremony.
共同筑起我们自己的家，祝福幸福满满。 永浴爱河。
P.T. Chuang and Rick Lauer for TaiwanPlus.
You're watching TaiwanPlus. Still to come. Taiwan's Cloudgate Dance Theatre stays busy during the pandemic. Unable to tour overseas, the troupe has taken part in festivals and other events around the country. Stay with us after the break.
最有人情味的地方。
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. A reminder of our top story. An exchange of messages between China's president and the main opposition party's new leader is drawing fire in Taiwan. Premier Su Zhenchang says the exchange proves the KMT will not defend the nation's sovereignty. Some analysts say the timing of the release of Canadians Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig at the same time as Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou confirmed their detention was nothing more than a retaliatory move, which creates a dangerous precedent. To discuss this more, I spoke to J. Michael Cole, who is a geopolitical consultant and fellow with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute.
It makes it very clear now that if any PRC national of value to the Chinese Communist Party is caught misbehaving in another country and faces legal action, now it's constantly going to be in the back of the minds of government officials and legal authorities in those countries that if indeed they were to take action against the Chinese national, there is a high likelihood that one of their own or several of their own could in return be taken hostage by the Chinese regime, again, to secure the release of the high-value PRC national in that particular country.
And taking a step back, looking at the broader picture, Canada has said that it will go into relations with China now with its eyes wide open. What does this mean?
Now there is much more widespread awareness across the political spectrum, an awareness of the nature of the regime that we are dealing with. 4 years ago, the crisis in Hong Kong had not happened, and there are lots of people of Hong Kong descent in Canada, so that also mobilized these individuals that captured the imagination of Canadian media. So there's absolutely no possibility of going back to the status quo ante with Canadians. And again, even if the federal government and the Liberals have just been re-elected to a minority government a week ago, even if the Liberal government under Prime Minister Trudeau wanted to go back to politics as usual when it comes to China, now they do so with the full awareness that they need to reflect the wishes of the Canadian public if they want to be re-elected come the next elections. So now Canada really has a choice as well. Does it want to be a participant in a community of democracies that is pushing back against authoritarian regimes like Beijing, or would it be willing to, do rapprochement with China, and in doing so, find itself sitting, outside the group of democracies? I think the choice is pretty clear for Canada as well. So by joining that community of democracies, it will, by default, be adopting policies that probably will not be very well received back in Beijing.
Olaf Scholz of Germany's Social Democratic Party, or SPD, has edged ahead in early federal election results. The winner will replace Angela Merkel, who's been the country's leader for 16 years. Exit polls suggested a tight race between the SPD and Merkel's Christian Democratic Union, now led by Armin Laschet. Annalena Baerbock's Green Party secured the best result in their electoral history with 14%. Their increased share means that Germany is likely to have its first three-way federal coalition since the 1960s. It could take months until the composition of the new government is finalised. Switzerland has voted to legalise same-sex marriage and adoption. The referendum passed with an almost two-thirds majority, despite opposition from conservative parties and religious groups. Switzerland becomes the 30th country in the world to legalise same-sex marriage. As for much of the world, the pandemic disrupted Taiwan's art scene. But world-famous dance troupe Cloudgate turned a crisis into an opportunity. Forced to cancel world tours, they spent time finding new sources of inspiration and engaging with local audiences. Rick Lau reports.
一个艺术作品，它没有办法解决社会的问题，它不是疫苗。它不能改变任何事情，但是有没有可能一个作品可以让人家得到安慰，甚至有时候可以暂时遗忘那些痛苦？或许这是我们可以努力的，我觉得。
Since Zheng Zonglong took the helm of Taiwan's Cloudgate Dance Theatre early last year, he and his dancers have been weathering the storm of the pandemic. Like much of the art world, the award-winning modern dance troupe was forced to give up its schedule of international performances and quickly adapt to the reality of a socially distanced world.
整个疫情的状态跟世界的状态好像还在一个不太安心的时刻，所以在这段期间里面呢，舞团最重要的事情，把很多的 schedule 行事历做了很多的调整。我们今年本来有非常多的国际的巡演，那他就放到家里面来。
Taiwan, which has been praised globally for its handling of the epidemic, avoided major lockdowns and restrictions on day-to-day life throughout 2020, partly due to enforcing strict border controls. Effectively confined to Taiwan, Zheng relished this chance to spend more time with his dancers and take them all over the country, from the busiest city districts to the island's highest mountains. He took them to his childhood neighborhood, Wanhua. This bustling, colorful district inspired his 2016 work, 13 Tongues, which toured Taiwan for a second time this year.
Wanhua 那个地方，艋舺刚好是青山祭，就是青山宫的绕境。我特别让舞者去参加了2天的祭典，因为当他们要呈现这个舞作的时候，他必须要真的知道你被那个鞭炮炸的是什么感觉。你在那个暗巷里面，都是霓虹灯的暗巷里面，那个是什么感觉？你在那个庙里面被那个烟熏，看到那些虔诚的人在地上祈祷的时候，那个是一个什么感觉？我觉得这个是因为疫情关系，我们多一点点时间，而且我觉得也是非常重要的是，舞者身为一个创作的桥梁，每一个人都会在这个经验里面吸收到更多，然后有机会去用他的身体，用他的精神，再把这一个可能性转译成舞蹈。
In 2020, Zheng also created Sounding Light. This far more subtle, quiet, thoughtful piece is partly a response to the emotions experienced during a pandemic. Zheng took some of Taiwan's best modern dancers to the top of some of Taiwan's highest peaks as part of his creative process.
因为疫情的关系，我们有时间，所以我带了舞者去爬了合欢山、合欢北峰。所以在那一个过程里面，其实大家都非常的安静，因为舞者的脚不是拿来爬山的，会被骂，他们不能拿来爬山。可是他们慢慢的走，一步一步的去体会 那一个重心的转移，一步一步的去体会那个脚有没有可能长出一些动作来。所以我觉得这可能是疫情之下我们找到的一个给舞者养分一个最大的帮助。
Cloudgate also took advantage of the situation to spend more time within the community. The dancers have been visiting schools and putting on special events at their theatre in Danshui.
对于们来讲，不外乎最重要的是将舞蹈分享给更多人。我们希望，不管是在剧场里面，不管是在偏僻的海边，不管是在有没有剧院的地方，我们都希望可以把我们的舞蹈带到那些地方去。会不会改变什么不知道，可是起码让他们看到一个不一样的事情在发生。
Above all, Zheng and his team have shown that while the pandemic has changed the world as we know it, there is still creative opportunity amid a time of crisis. Rick Glowett, Chen Huanran, and Gao Weihao for TaiwanPlus.
Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus. We'll leave you with some images of the cliff diving World Series in Italy. World champions Gary Hunt and Rhiannon Ifland ended the seasons with respective wins. Stay safe and see you next time.